It's funny how it goes in The Good, the Bad, the Ugly. Eli Wallach, who played Tuco, the what do you call somewhat partner and somewhat associate of the great Clint Eastwood, the man with no name. They come up with a scheme to have Tuco get arrested and Eastwood save him from the hangman's noose. It's played for comic, but his next big western or big box office western had Eastwood under the noose, and his character survives, but with dangerous results. Now, this movie was very controversial when it came out because the title itself got banned in certain jurisdictions. You couldn't say the title in the text, so it would hang them high, or Clint Eastwood hang blank high. So it's called Hang 'em High. The '68 American Deluxe color revisionist western was directed by the great Ted Post and written by Leonard Freeman and Mel Goldberg. Clint Eastwood plays Jed Cooper, an innocent man who survives the lynching. Inger Stevens plays the widow who helps him, Ed Begley Sr. as the leader of the gang that lynched Cooper, and the great Pat Hingle as the federal judge who hires him as a deputy U.S. Marshal. Hang 'em High was the first production of the Malposo Company, Eastwood's self-contained production company. Now, Hinkle portrays a fictional judge who mirrors Judge Isaac Parker, who was called a hanging judge due to the large number of men he sentenced to be executed during his service in the late 1800s as district judge of the U.S. District Court of the Western District of Arkansas. The film also depicts the dangers of serving as a deputy U.S. Marshal during that time, as many of these marshals were killed while serving under Parker. The fictional Fort Grant, base of operations for the district judge seat, is also a mirror of the factual Fort Smith, Arkansas, where Judge Parker's court was located. Now, cinematography by the great Richard H. Klein and Leonard J. South, music by Dominic Frontieri, and released by United Artists. Had a budget of $1.6 million, but did quite good at the box office, and one of the biggest of Clint Eastwood's VHS releases during the first phase of the VHS boom of the early 80s. Now, this one, in Oklahoma Territory in 1889, retired lawman Jed Cooper is surrounded by a posse of 9 men. Captain Wilson, Reno, Miller, Jenkins, Stone, Maddow, Tommy, Loomis, and Charlie Blackfoot. They demand a receipt for the cattle Cooper is driving. The cattle seller is a robber who killed a rancher. Cooper explains that he knew nothing about the murder, but only Jenkins expresses doubts about his guilt. After Reno takes Cooper's horse and saddle and Miller takes his wallet, the men hang him from the tree and they ride away. Shortly afterwards, Marshal Dave Bliss rescues a half-dead Cooper and takes him to Fort Grant, where the territorial judge, Adam Fenton, determines that Cooper is innocent, sets him free, and warns him not to take his own revenge. As an alternative, Fenton offers Cooper a job as a marshal. He accepts, and Fenton warns him to not kill the lynchers, but to bring them in for trial. Now, while picking up a prisoner, Cooper sees his horse and saddle in front of a local saloon. He finds Reno inside and tries to arrest him, but Reno draws at him, forcing Cooper to gun him down. Jenkins, learning of Reno's death at the hands of a marshal with a hanging scar, turns himself in and provides the names of the rest of the posse. Cooper finds Stone in the town of Red Creek, arrests him, and has the local sheriff, Ray Calhoun, not like Rory Calhoun, put him in jail. Most of the men Cooper seeks are respective citizens of Red Creek, but Calhoun honors Cooper's warrants for their arrests. Now, while en route to arrest the other men, Cooper and Calhoun come across the murder of 2 men and the rustling of their herd. Cooper forms a posse of his own to pursue the stolen herd and discovers that the rustlers are Miller and his 2 teenage brother, Ben and Billy Joe. He prevents the rustlers from being lynched themselves, then takes them to Fort Grant single-handedly when the posse deserts him. He frees Ben and Billy Joe from their bonds after he insists that only Miller committed the murders. Miller eventually attacks Cooper after freeing his hands, but Cooper subdues him and brings all 3 men to Fort Grant. Now, Fenton sentences the 3 rustlers to be hanged, despite Cooper's defense of the teenagers. Fenton insists that the public will resort to lynching if they see rustlers going unpunished, threatening Oklahoma's bid for statehood. Sometime later, Calhoun arrives at Fort Grant and offers to pay Cooper for his lost cattle with money from Captain Wilson and the other lynchers. Cooper makes it clear that while they're alive, he still intends to arrest them. With the bribe rejected, Blackfoot and Maddow flee, while Tommy and Lupus remain loyal to Wilson and agree to help him kill Cooper. As it stands, During a public hanging for Miller, the brothers and the three other men and the lynchers ambush Cooper in a brothel, seriously wounding him. Clint was big problem. He's always going to brothels with no ammunition. Cooper survives and is slowly nursed back to the health by a widow, Rachel Warren. Rachel reveals she's hunting for the outlaws who killed her husband and raped her. She and Cooper begin an affair. He says that she might never find her rapist. Cooper tries to resign, but Judge Fenton gives him the location of Wilson's ranch, where Wilson, Tommy, and Loomis are hiding. The three men try to ambush Cooper as he approached the ranch house. He survives again, stabs Loomis to death, and shoots Tommy. He tries but fails to capture Wilson before he hangs himself. After returning to Fort Grant, Cooper hands in his marshal's star and demands that Fenton sign a pardon for Jenkins, who is both contrite and seriously ill. The two men debate the merits of territorial justice. Fenton insists that he's doing as well as he can, cursing the fact that he's the only court in the territory with little recourse for plaintiffs, and tells Cooper that if he disagrees with him, the best thing he can do is help Oklahoma become a state, and thus get proper courts, by continuing to serve as a U.S. Marshal. Cooper takes back his star in exchange for Jenkins' release. Fenton then gives Cooper fresh warrants for Blackfoot and Maddow, telling him the law still wants him. Cooper nods and rides off. Left it open for a sequel, but for some reason, and this could have been easily a Jonah Hex-style movie. Clint Eastwood was Jonah Hex was Clint Eastwood. That's neither here nor there. It's all past. But what a cast. Inger Stevens, Ed Begley, Pat Hengel, Ben Johnson of all people, Bruce Stern, idiot, Alan Halliwell Jr., Dennis Hopper, L.Q. Jones, James MacArthur as the preacher, very good underrated performance, and Michael Lembeck as Marvin, the store clerk, an integrated production. Now, Eastwood spent most of late 66 and 67 dubbing for the English language version of the Dollars trilogy and being interviewed, something which left them feel angry and frustrated. Stardom brought him more roles in a tough guy mold, and Irving Leonard, his business manager, gave him a script to a new film, the American revisionist Western Hang 'em High, a cross between Rawhide and Leone's Westerns. Now, it was written by Mel Goldberg and produced by Leonard Freeman. However, the William Morris Agency had wanted him to star in a bigger picture, McKenna's Gold, with a cast of notable actors such as Gregory Peck, Omar Sharif, and Telly Savalas. Eastwood, however, did not approve and preferred the script for Hang 'em High, but had one complaint, which he voiced to the producers. The scene before the six-man hanging, where the hero is attacked by the enemies, Eastwood believed that the scene would not be believable as set in a saloon. They eventually agreed to introduce a scene with Cooper taking a prostitute upstairs during the hanging and having the attack take place afterwards as Eastwood enters the Bordeaux's bar. Eastwood signed for the film with a salary, get this, $400,000 and 25% of the net earnings of the film, playing the character of Jed Cooper, a man accused by vigilantes of a rancher's murder, lynched and left for dead, who later seeks revenge. So if you do the rough numbers, if it had a net profit of $6 million, that was 1.5 there plus 400,000, made him $1 million star. Now, with the wealth generated by the Dollars trilogy, Irving Leonard helped set up Eastwood's long-desired new production company, Mariposa, named after Mariposa Creek, which flows through property Eastwood owned at the time in Monterey. Leonard became the company's president and arranged for Hang 'em High to be a joint production with UA. Directors Robert Aldrich and John Sturgis were considered as directors, but on the request of Eastwood, old friend Ted Post was brought in to direct. He was signed against the wishes of Freeman, whom Eastwood overruled. Post was important for casting for the film and arranged for the beautiful Inger Stevens of The Farmer's Daughter fame to play the role of Rachel Warren. She had not heard of Eastwood or Sergio Leone at the time, but instantly took a liking to Eastwood and accepted. Eastwood and Inger Stevens began a short relationship during filming. You could see the chemistry on film. Now, composer Dominic Frontieri was given just 8 days to compose an Ennio Morricone-type score. His theme appeared in a large number of cover versions, ranging from Hugo Montenegro to Booker T. and the MGs. It was also covered by Walla Voodoo in a medley with other spaghetti western music. Now, this is quite weird. In some territories, this movie was released before the Leone trilogy because it was still being dubbed in English, even though it had a whole bunch of international releases. Now, although the film is purportedly set in Oklahoma, Freeman arrived in Las Cruces, New Mexico on May 25th, 1967 to scout locations. That same day, Freeman located the tree to be used for the hanging in the opening scene, about 12 miles north of Las Cruces. Filming began on June 27, 67, in the La Cruces area, with additional scenes shot at the beautiful White Sands. The interiors were shot at the great MGM studios. The opening lynching scene was filmed June 29, 67, next to the Rio Grande. The tree used for the hanging is no longer standing, and the riverbed is now overgrown with thick brush. Eastwood had considerable leeway in the production, especially in the script, which was altered in parts such as dialogue and the setting of the barroom scene to his liking. The film was a major success after release in August 68 and an open day revenue of $5,241 in Baltimore alone, and became the biggest UA opening in history, exceeding all the James Bond films at that time. It debuted at number 5 in Variety's weekly survey of top films and had recouped production expenses within 2 weeks of screening. It eventually made $6.8 million in the States and $4 million abroad, which gave him $10.8 million, which is like $45 million now. It was praised by critics, including Arthur Winston of the New York Post, who described Hang 'em High as a Western of quality, courage, danger, and excitement. Variety gave the film a negative review, calling it a poor American-made imitation of a poor Italian-made imitation of an American-made Western. George Tashman wrote in the Berkeley Gazette that it was, all intents and purposes, an apple pie Western, a spaghetti Western made in Hollywood. Now, as of February 2022, Hang 'em High had a 92% freshness rating on Rotten Tomatoes. Now, the song Hang 'em High by American rock band My Chemical Romance is named after the film. Now, what bothered a lot of people with the movie was not the violence, but the fact that an ongoing nightmare for especially people in Canada, because of the Truscott case and the many hangings that were legal in Canada. You see, the United States was not a Commonwealth system. Most major murders in Canada from the late 1800s to time when it was pretty well abolished in the early 1960s, hanging. Now, some of these hangings in Canada were botched. Some innocent people went to the gallows. And my cousin Joe Richard committed a murder in Charlotte, New Brunswick. He was the last person hung for murder in the Pitcher Province, New Brunswick. And still, when Hang 'em High came out, there was a lot of people who went to the drive-ins. It brought up a lot of bad memories in Canada because there's a terminology about hangman's noose. You have to hang him high enough so he doesn't touch the ground when he comes through the falling boards underneath him, right? But Eastwood, it was a point there every movie he was doing, including his non-westerns, leading up to Dirty Harry. I was born in 65. I knew him as a Western star before Dirty Harry, and I knew what he could do, right, eh? But the trilogy and this and all to High Plains Drifter, for certain people, Eastwood was an action star, but for other people who didn't like his action movies, he was a Western star, just like Charles Bronson. Because Bronson did a lot of Westerns and action movies. I give this movie 3 out of 4, and I'll tell you why. It's not for everybody, but how many times are you going to see a movie with Dennis Hopper, Clint Eastwood, Ben Johnson, Ed Begley? That prick Bruce Dern is not as great an actor you think. The guy who killed John Wayne and the Cowboys, is an idiot, but, has these fans. So where are you going to find all these people in the movie? It's like an all-star team with Gretzky and Messi and Lafleur, Schott and Lemaire and Esposito and Kenny Hodge. It was an all-star team. You never go wrong with Ben Johnson in the movie or Dennis Hopper, because Dennis Hopper, you look at True Grit, you look at Giant. At the time, he was in his second decade. And what was ironic here, this was before Easy Rider. So, around the same time, but before this, a tremendous movie. If you can find this on a Western streaming service, I would suspect there's a longer edit, because when I was growing up, I read an article on Hang 'em High. It was a Clint Eastwood combination book of his Westerns. They were saying there's a cutout there, 125 minutes. Now, if anybody knows if that's still around, you rarely see this movie on regular TV. If you do see it, it was being shown all over the place in the 70s, afternoons or whatever, late night in Canada. But again, it was one of the most popular movies of my era. So Hang 'em High, if you enjoy that.